The first day passed like a nightmare that would not end. Jack Morrison and his team watched from their hiding spots as the aliens began to explore the jungle. What they saw made no sense at first. These creatures were supposed to be the ultimate, predators from the deadliest worlds in space. But they were struggling with things that humans considered normal. A group of Shardketh warriors encountered their first army ant colony near a fallen log. The ants were just doing what army ants always did, marching in perfect lines, eating everything in their path. But when the crystal aliens tried to walk through the column, something unexpected happened. The ants immediately changed their behavior. Instead of scattering, they began to swarm up the aliens' crystal bodies in perfect coordination. The Shardketh tried to brush them off, but army ants do not give up easily. More and more ants joined the attack. They found cracks between the crystal plates and began to bite with mandibles that could cut through anything. The aliens' energy shields flickered and failed as millions of tiny insects overwhelmed their systems. Within minutes, 3 crystal warriors were retreating through the jungle, covered in angry ants, making sounds like breaking glass. Amy Rodriguez watched this happen from her position in a tree. She could not believe what she was seeing. These aliens could destroy trees with their weapons, but they could not handle insects that her grandmother used to step on in her backyard. "Did you see that?" she whispered into her radio. "I saw it," Jack replied, "but I do not understand it." The void spawn had their own problems. These creatures had evolved in the silence of empty space, where the only sounds were the distant hum of stars. But the Amazon was never quiet. Birds called from every direction, insects buzzed and chirped, monkeys howled in the distance, water dripped from leaves, wind moved through the trees. The constant noise was driving the shadow creatures crazy. One void spawn stopped moving completely and began to shake. It made a sound like static electricity, growing louder and louder until it was screaming. The other aliens tried to help it, but the creature suddenly exploded into a cloud of dark gas and disappeared. The jungle had killed it without laying a finger on it. Tony Blake had been a demolitions expert for 10 years, but he had never seen anything blow up from too much noise. He began to understand that these aliens were not as tough as they looked. They were strong in their own environments, but Earth was different from anything they had ever faced. The second day brought even bigger surprises. The aliens tried to set up a base camp in a clearing by cutting down trees with their energy weapons. It seemed like a smart idea. Clear the area, establish a perimeter, control the territory. It was basic military strategy that worked on every world they had conquered, but Earth did not follow their rules. The moment they cut down the first tree, the jungle began to fight back. The tree released chemicals into the air, pheromones that humans could barely smell, but that traveled for miles through the forest. Every insect species in the area received the same message. The forest was under attack. Within an hour, the clearing was swarming with creatures the aliens had never imagined. Bullet ants with stings that felt like being shot, hornets the size of a human thumb, beetles with jaws that could cut metal, spiders that dropped from overhead on silk threads, landing on alien heads and biting with venom that affected their nervous systems. But the worst were the plants themselves. When the aliens cut down trees, they exposed root systems that had been growing underground for decades. Fungal networks that connected every plant in the forest suddenly detected the presence of foreign organisms. Spores began to drift through the air, tiny particles that the aliens' sensors registered as harmless plant matter. They were wrong. The spores began to stick to alien equipment and eat through their protective coatings. Metal parts started to corrode. Electronic systems began to malfunction. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy they could not see and could not shoot. Lisa Hayes had studied biology in college before joining the Army. She understood what was happening even if she could not believe it. The jungle was not just a collection of individual plants and animals. It was a single organism, and the aliens had just declared war on the entire thing. Danny Wright was watching from a position near a river when he saw something that changed everything. A group of Krathos warriors had come to the water to drink. These were creatures that could survive in temperatures hot enough to melt steel. They were the top predators on a planet covered in lava. But when one of them bent down to drink from the Amazon River, an electric eel touched its snout. The shock was not enough to kill the alien, but it was enough to disrupt its energy shield. The moment the shield flickered, piranhas attacked. Then, caimans. Then things that Danny could not even identify. The alien warrior fought back with strength that could crush cars, but it was fighting the entire ecosystem of the river. When the battle was over, the Krathos warrior was dead, killed by fish that humans caught for sport. Jack Morrison was beginning to understand something important. These aliens were incredibly dangerous individually, but they had never faced an environment like Earth. Every other planet they had conquered was simple compared to this. One main predator, maybe two. A single type of dangerous plant. Weather that followed predictable patterns. Earth was chaos. There were millions of species, all of them connected, all of them adapted to survive in the most competitive environment, in the galaxy. And humans had learned to work with this chaos instead of fighting against it. Amy Rodriguez had an idea. She knew these jungles better than most people. She had trained in dozens of different environments, but the Amazon was special. It was not just dangerous, it was smart. The jungle communicated with itself through chemical signals, electrical impulses, and sound patterns that scientists were only beginning to understand. If she could learn to speak the jungle's language, maybe she could turn it into a weapon. Tony. Blake was thinking about explosives, but not the kind he usually used. The jungle was full of things that could explode or burn or poison. Plants that released toxic gases when damaged. Fruits that fermented into alcohol strong enough to blind you. Tree saps that became flammable in the right conditions. He did not need to carry bombs when the entire forest was a weapon waiting to be used. Lisa Hayes was studying the aliens' behavior patterns. They moved like predators, but they were predators from controlled environments. They expected their prey to run or fight back directly. They did not know how to handle prey that disappeared into the jungle and attacked from unexpected directions. Danny. Wright was taking notes on everything he observed. His farm background had taught him to watch animals carefully, to understand their patterns and weaknesses. These aliens were just animals from other worlds. They had strengths, but they also had weaknesses that could be exploited. By the end of the second day, the alien force had lost over 300 warriors. They had not encountered a single human in combat, but the jungle itself was killing them. Commander Vexahal could not understand what was happening. His warriors were dying, from insects, plants, and fish. This was not warfare, this was something else entirely. He decided to change tactics. Instead of spreading out to hunt, they would fortify their position and wait for the local predators to come to them. It was a decision that would seal their fate, because the apex predators of Earth were already watching them, learning from them, and preparing to hunt. The final battle for the galaxy began in the dark space around Keth Dan, the homeworld of the Empire. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Liberation, watching as the largest fleet in human history dropped out of faster-than-light travel. But it was not just a human fleet anymore. Ships from dozens of species filled the space around Keth Dan like a swarm of angry insects. The blue-skinned Altarians flew alongside human destroyers. Crystal ships from Zephyr Prime gleamed like diamonds in the starlight. Even the peaceful plant beings of Vega had sent their garden ships, now bristling with weapons provided by human engineers. "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Kate Phillips, "we have confirmation from all fleet groups. 2,000 ships, ready for battle." Blake nodded grimly. It had taken 2 years to build this alliance, 2 years of fighting and dying and proving to the galaxy that the Kethvar could be beaten. Now, every species that had ever suffered under the Empire's rule had come to witness its end. On the other Side of the battlefield, Admiral Zexthul prepared his own forces aboard the massive bioship Deathbringer. The Kethvar had pulled back their fleets from across the galaxy to defend their homeworld. 3,000 bioships surrounded the planet like a living wall of death. "Sir," reported Commander Veltar, "the enemy fleet is larger than our estimates." "Suggested?" "They have ships from at least 30 different species." Zexthul studied the tactical displays with mixed emotions. Part of him was impressed by what the humans had accomplished. In less than 3 years, they had united species that had been enemies for centuries. They had turned the greatest predators in the galaxy into the hunted. But another part of him was terrified. For the first time in Kethvar history, their homeworld was under direct attack. If they lost this battle, the Empire would fall and his people would face extinction. "All ships," he broadcast to his fleet. "Remember what we are fighting for. This is our home. These creatures think they can destroy 3,000 years of Kethvar dominance. Show them they are wrong." The battle began when the human ship Vengeance, commanded by Captain Ben Hayes, fired the first shot. A blue beam of neural disruptor energy struck a Kethvar cruiser, causing it to writhe in pain and confusion. Within seconds, 1,000 weapons opened fire as both fleets crashed into each other like two avalanches meeting in space. Blake watched the tactical display as the battle unfolded. Human ships darted between the massive biovessels, using their speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the Kethvar firepower. The alien allies followed human tactics, coordinating their attacks through encrypted communications that the Kethvar could not intercept. "Crystal Squadron, focus fire on target Delta 7, Blake ordered into her communicator. "Altarian wings, provide cover for the boarding shuttles." Yes, boarding shuttles. The humans had learned that the best way to kill a bioship was from the inside. Specially trained Marines in powered armor would cut through the hull and fight their way to the ship's neural center. It was dangerous work, but it was effective. Colonel Henry Parker led the first wave of assault troops toward the Deathbringer itself. His Marines flew through space in small, fast shuttles, dodging Kethvar weapons as they approached the flagship. Parker had volunteered for this mission because he knew it would be the most dangerous one of the war. "Remember your training," he told his troops over the radio. "Get inside, find the brain, and shut it down. These things are tough, but they can be killed." The shuttles struck the Deathbringer's hull like arrows hitting a target. Human Marines used plasma cutters to burn through the organic armor while Kethvar immune systems tried to kill them with acid and toxic gas. But human technology had improved over the years of fighting. Their armor could withstand bioship defenses long enough to get inside. Parker was the first one through the breach. He found himself in a corridor that looked like the inside of some massive animal with walls that pulsed like a heartbeat and floors covered in some kind of organic slime. Red lights provided dim illumination, and the air was filled with a sound like breathing. "Move fast," he ordered his team. "This thing knows we're here." The corridors of the Deathbringer were a maze of organic passages that twisted and curved like blood vessels. Parker's Marines had to fight their way through defensive organisms that the ship's immune system sent to stop them. Some looked like giant white blood cells. Others were more like organic robots with claws and acid weapons. But the humans had fought through bioships before. They knew how to navigate the organic mazes and how to kill the ship's defenses. After 30 minutes of fighting, Parker's team reached the neural center at the heart of the vessel. The brain of the Deathbringer was a massive organic computer that filled an entire chamber. It pulsed with electrical activity as it controlled every function of the ship. Thick cables connected it to the hull, the weapons, and the life support systems. Admiral Zexthul was there waiting for them. The Kethvar commander stood guard over his ship's brain, his claws extended and his red eyes glowing with fury. He was twice the size of any human, with natural armor that could stop bullets and strength that could crush steel. "You will not destroy my ship," he snarled in perfect English. The Kethvar had learned human languages during the years of war. Parker raised his weapon, but something in the alien's voice made him pause. This was not the voice of a mindless predator. This was the voice of someone who was afraid. You're scared, Parker realized. For the first time in your life, you're actually scared. Zexthul's mandibles clicked together. Yes, he admitted. You have taught us fear, but you have also taught us something else. What's that? Respect. The two warriors faced each other in the pulsing red light of the bioship's brain. Around them, the battle for the galaxy continued to rage, but in this moment, it was just a human and a Kethvar trying to understand each other. We underestimated you, Zexthul continued. We thought you were weak because you felt fear. We did not understand that you fight not because you lack fear, but in spite of it. Parker kept his weapon trained on the alien, but he found himself listening. Why are you telling me this? Because the war is over. My people have lost. But perhaps it does not have to end with our extinction. Outside the ship, the Kethvar fleet was collapsing. Bioships burned in the darkness while the Allied fleet pressed their attack. The empire that had ruled for 3,000 years was dying. But inside the Deathbringer, two enemies began to talk about something that no one had thought possible. Peace. The emergency meeting of the Kethvar High Command took place on the fortress moon of Drextar, deep in the heart of the Empire. For the first time in 3,000 years, the rulers of the galaxy were afraid. Admiral Zexthul stood before the Council of Elders, his report floating in holographic displays around the chamber. The numbers told a story that none of them wanted to believe. In 6 months of fighting, the Kethvar Empire had lost 47 ships to the humans, not damaged or disabled, but completely destroyed. This is impossible, hissed Elder Mordeth, her ancient voice crackling with disbelief. No species has ever destroyed even one of our ships in open combat. The humans have destroyed 47, Zexthul replied grimly. And they're getting better at it every day. Supreme Elder Kexthul raised one clawed hand for silence. At 800 years old, he was the oldest living Kethvar and had personally overseen the conquest of 600 worlds. His red eyes glowed with barely controlled rage. Explain to me how these soft creatures are killing our ships, he demanded. Zexthul activated another display showing detailed analysis of human tactics. They learn from every battle, Supreme Elder. When we destroy one of their ships, they study the wreckage to understand how our weapons work. When they capture one of our crew members, they interrogate them for information about our technology. Interrogate? Elder Velshin seemed confused by the concept. Why do they not simply consume the prisoners? They do not eat their enemies. Elder. They ask questions. They want to understand us so they can fight us more effectively. The chamber fell silent as the elders tried to process this information. The Kethvar had evolved as predators who killed and consumed their prey. The idea of keeping enemies alive to learn from them was completely foreign to their nature. Show us their new weapons, ordered the Supreme Elder. Zexthul switched to combat recordings from recent battles. The displays showed human ships that looked nothing like the primitive vessels they had first encountered. These new ships combined human engineering with captured Kethvar technology, creating hybrid vessels that were both mechanical and biological. They have learned to grow their own bioarmor, Zexthul explained. But unlike our ships, theirs can be repaired quickly using standard human tools. They have also developed weapons that specifically target our neural networks. The recording showed a human ship firing strange blue energy beams at a Kethvar destroyer. When the beams hit, the bioship writhed in pain and began firing randomly at empty space, its targeting systems completely confused. Neural disruptor weapons, Zexthul continued. They cause our ships to hallucinate false targets. The bioships attack shadows while the real human vessels move in for the kill. Elder Mordeth leaned forward, her mandibles clicking with nervous energy. How did they develop such weapons so quickly? They have been studying our prisoners, Elder. Every HFY warrior they capture tells them more about our biology. They use this information to create new ways to hurt us. But the weapons were not the worst part. What truly terrified Zexthul was how the humans fought. They had no respect for the natural order of predator and prey. When cornered, they attacked. When outnumbered, they called for reinforcements. When facing certain death, they found ways to survive and keep fighting. At the Battle of New Moscow, Zexthul reported, Commander Lisa Park was surrounded by 5 of our ships. Instead of surrendering, she broadcast her location to every human ship in the system and told them to fire everything they had at her position. She committed suicide? Asked Elder Velshin. No, Elder. She had equipped her ship with experimental shield technology that could withstand our weapons for exactly 30 seconds. She used those 30 seconds to coordinate a massive human counterattack that destroyed all 5 HFY ships. The elders exchanged worried glances. This was behavior they could not understand or predict. How could they fight an enemy that turned certain death into victory? There is more, Zexthul added reluctantly. The humans have begun launching attacks deep into our territory. This caused an uproar among the elders. For 3 millennia, no enemy had ever penetrated more than a few light years into HFY space. The very idea of foreign ships attacking the heart of the Empire was unthinkable. Impossible, snarled Elder Mordeth. Our defenses are absolute. Not anymore. Zexthul activated another display showing human fleet movements. Captain Ben Hayes led a raid on our supply depot at Vextar Prime. His ships penetrated our defenses using captured bioships and destroyed 3 months' worth of supplies. How did they get bioships? They stole them, Elder. During the Battle of Kepler Station, human Marines captured one of our destroyers intact. Their engineers have been studying it for weeks, learning how to pilot and maintain bioships. The Supreme Elder's claws scraped against his throne as he tried to control his rage. Send more fleets. Crush these humans before they can spread their madness to other species. But Zexthul had more bad news to deliver. It may be too late for that, Supreme Elder. The humans have been broadcasting messages to every species in the galaxy. They are telling them that the HFY can be defeated. The chamber erupted in angry hisses and clicking mandibles. For 3,000 years, the Empire's greatest weapon had been the fear of other species. When worlds heard that the HFY were coming, they surrendered without fighting. But if that fear was gone, "Show me these broadcasts," demanded the Supreme Elder. The display showed a human female in military uniform speaking directly to the camera. Admiral Susan Blake's voice was calm and confident as she addressed the galaxy. "To all free peoples of the galaxy," she said, "the HFY Empire has ruled through fear for too long, but fear only works if you let it. We have proven that they can be beaten. Their ships can be destroyed. Their warriors can be killed. Join us, and together we can free the galaxy from 3,000 years of tyranny." As if to emphasize her point, the background behind Blake showed human ships attacking a HFY fortress. The massive biostructure was burning, its organic walls splitting open as human forces poured inside. "The response has been immediate," Zexthul reported quietly. 17 species have already declared rebellion against the Empire. The Altarians, who we thought were completely destroyed, have emerged from hiding with weapons provided by the humans. The crystal people of Zephyr Prime have attacked our garrison there. Even the peaceful plant beings of Vega have taken up arms. Supreme. Elder Kexathul rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. For 8 centuries, he had been the ultimate predator in a galaxy full of prey. Now, for the first time, he understood what it felt like to be hunted. "The humans have awakened something that should have stayed sleeping," he said quietly. "They have given hope to the hopeless, and hope, he realized, was far more dangerous than any weapon." Admiral Zexthul stared at the battle reports from New Texas with growing confusion. The numbers made no sense according to everything he knew about warfare and the natural order of the universe. One Kethvar ship destroyed, another badly damaged, 17 smaller ships damaged to various degrees. All of this caused by a handful of primitive human vessels that should have been destroyed in the first few minutes of combat. "Explain this to me again," Zexthul demanded, his claws clicking against the datapad that contained the impossible report. Commander Veltar shifted uncomfortably. "The humans refused to surrender or flee, Admiral. Instead, they engaged our ships directly. Their weapons were primitive but effective at close range. They used suicide tactics." "Suicide tactics," Zexthul repeated slowly. "You mean they deliberately destroyed their own ships?" "Yes, sir. The human Commander Morrison detonated his ship's reactor while ramming the Bone Crusher. Both vessels were completely destroyed." Zexthul had been alive for 4 centuries. He had conquered hundreds of worlds and faced dozens of different species. Some fought back briefly before surrendering. Others fled immediately. A few tried to hide. But none had ever deliberately destroyed themselves just to damage a Kethvar ship. It made no logical sense. Self-preservation was the most basic instinct of any intelligent life form. Even the most aggressive species understood that staying alive was more important than winning a single battle. "Perhaps they were malfunctioning," suggested Veltar. "Their brains might not work properly, some kind of mental defect that prevents them from understanding danger." Zexthul wanted to believe this explanation, but more reports were coming in from other human colonies. The pattern was always the same. When Kethvar ships arrived, the humans fought back with desperate fury. They used cargo ships as weapons, turned space stations into bombs, and sent their own people on suicide missions to damage Kethvar vessels. At the mining colony of New Montana, a human engineer named Pete Johnson had somehow snuck aboard a Kethvar ship and planted explosives in the engine room. The ship had been destroyed from the inside while Johnson died in the explosion. His last transmission had been heard across the battlefield. "This is for my kids," at the research station orbiting. Kepler Prime, Commander Rachel Torres had done something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted. When her small defense fleet was overwhelmed, she had ordered her Marines to board the Kethvar flagship. Zexthul reviewed the tactical recordings from that battle with disbelief. Human soldiers in crude metal armor had somehow cut through the hull of a bioship and fought their way to the command center. The Kethvar crew, trained from birth to be perfect killers, had been caught completely off guard. "How did they penetrate our bio-armor?" Zexthul asked his science officer. "They used some kind of chemical explosive, sir. Very primitive, but surprisingly effective. They also employed kinetic weapons that fire small metal projectiles at high speed." "And they killed the ship's commander?" "Yes, sir. Commander Torres personally executed Shipmaster Krexval with one of their projectile weapons. The humans call them guns." Zexthul felt something cold crawling up his spine. In 3,000 years of conquest, no Kethvar ship commander had ever been killed by an enemy boarding party. The very idea was absurd. Kethvar ships were living organisms with immune systems designed to kill intruders. The corridors were filled with toxic gases. The walls secreted acid that could melt through most armor. But somehow, these humans had not only survived inside a bioship, they had actually taken control of it. What happened to the ship after the humans killed the crew? "They used it to attack the rest of our fleet, sir. Turned our own weapons against us. We lost 2 more ships before we could destroy it." The more Zexthul learned about humans, the more disturbed he became. They seemed to have no sense of proper behavior during warfare. When outnumbered, they attacked. When surrounded, they fought harder. When facing certain death, they tried to take as many enemies with them as possible. It was completely irrational, but it was also effective. The reports kept coming in. At New Angeles, a human pilot named Maria Santos had used her civilian transport ship to ram a Kethvar destroyer. At Darwin Station, A group of human children had somehow hacked into the colony's defense systems and used them to coordinate attacks against Kethvar ground forces. Even more disturbing were the intercepted human communications. Zexthul had expected to hear panic, despair, and pleas for mercy. Instead, the humans seemed to be getting excited about fighting the Kethvar. "Look at this transmission from their military command," Veltar said, playing a recording from human space. A female human voice spoke with calm authority. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Susan Blake. New intelligence indicates that Kethvar bioships have vulnerable points at the junction of their main hull segments. Target these areas with concentrated fire. Also, their neural networks appear to be susceptible to electromagnetic pulse weapons. I want every ship equipped with EMP. Charges within 48 hours. Zexthul listened to the message with growing alarm. The humans were studying Kethvar ships, learning their weaknesses, and developing new weapons specifically designed to kill them. No species had ever done this before. Most were too terrified to think clearly during battle. "They're not afraid," he realized with shock. "Sir? They're not afraid of us, Veltar. Every other species we've encountered has been paralyzed by fear when they see our ships. But these humans, they're treating us like a problem to be solved." More evidence supported this conclusion. Human scientists were analyzing debris from destroyed Kethvar ships. Their engineers were building new weapons based on captured technology. Their military academies were teaching courses on Kethvar combat tactics, as if the Empire were just another enemy to be defeated. Most shocking of all were the reports from human colonies that had been evacuated. Instead of fleeing to safety, many humans were volunteering to join their military. They wanted to fight the Kethvar. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet at Proxima Station." "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was young and female, but it carried an authority that made Zexthul's skin crawl. "This is Lieutenant Commander Kate Phillips of the UES Retribution. You attacked our convoy 3 days ago and killed 17 of our people. We've been hunting you ever since. Surrender now or we'll destroy your ships one by one." Zexthul looked at his tactical display. His fleet consisted of 8 bioships, each capable of destroying an entire human city. The human force approaching. Them contained only 4 small vessels. But for the first time in his long life, Admiral Zexthul felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid. The alarm bells rang through the bridge of the UES Defiant as Captain Jake Morrison stared at the sensor readings. 3 massive objects had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Texas system. Each one was bigger than anything humanity had ever built, and they were moving toward the mining colony with clear hostile intent. "What the hell are those things?" asked Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park, his first officer. She was studying the tactical display with growing concern. Morrison had been in space for 20 years. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and corporate security forces during the mining wars. He had seen every type of ship that humanity had ever built, but these things on his screen looked like nothing he had ever encountered before. "They're not showing up as metal," reported the sensor officer. "Sir, these readings suggest they're made of some kind of organic material, like they're alive." Before Morrison could respond, the communication system crackled to life. A harsh, grinding voice filled the bridge, speaking in a language that sounded like breaking glass and scraping metal. The ship's computer worked quickly to translate the alien words. "Attention, primitive species," the message began. "You will evacuate all worlds in this sector within 1 solar rotation. Resistance will result in your extinction. This is the only warning you will receive." The bridge fell silent. 23 crew members stared at their captain, waiting for his response. Outside the viewports, the 3 alien ships continued their steady approach toward New Texas, where 40,000 human colonists were going about their daily lives. Morrison felt something hot and angry rising in his chest. He had spent his whole career protecting people from bullies and pirates who thought they could take whatever they wanted. Now some alien species was threatening innocent families simply because they could. "Sir," Park said quietly, "those ships are reading as 30 kilometers long each. Our entire fleet in this system is only 12 ships, and most of them are cargo haulers." Morrison looked at the tactical display again. She was right. The human ships in the New Texas system were mostly converted freighters with basic weapons. They had been designed to fight off pirates, not massive alien warships. Any reasonable person would consider evacuation, but Morrison had never been accused of being reasonable. "Open a channel," he ordered. The communications officer looked uncertain. "Sir, are you sure that's wise?" "Open the channel." Morrison stood up from his command chair and straightened his uniform. When the channel opened, he spoke in the clear, firm voice that had gotten him through a dozen battles. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Navy. You are in violation of interstellar law by threatening civilian populations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came back almost instantly. The alien voice sounded amused, as if Morrison had told some kind of joke. "Your threats amuse us, soft flesh. We are the Kethvar. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Nothing in this universe makes us afraid." Morrison felt his jaw tighten. He had heard that kind of arrogance before, usually from corporate executives, who thought their money made them untouchable. It never ended well for them. "Well then," Morrison said calmly, "you haven't met humans yet." He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. Every face on the bridge was watching him with a mixture of fear and determination. They all knew they were outgunned. They all knew the smart thing to do was run, but they also knew that 40,000 people were counting on them. "Lisa, get me fleet command. Tell them we need every available ship in this system now. Emergency priority." Park was already working at her station. "Sir, even if we get every ship, we're still outnumbered and outgunned." "Maybe," Morrison admitted, "but we're not going to abandon those colonists without a fight." Over the next 6 hours, ships began arriving from across the system. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, even a few luxury yachts answered the call. By the time the alien fleet reached the outer edge of New Texas orbit, Morrison had assembled a ragtag force of 37 ships. It wasn't much, but it was what they had. The first alien ship to enter weapons range was a nightmare made real. Its hull pulsed with organic life, covered in what looked like scales or armor plating. Strange protrusions extended from its sides like massive claws, and Morrison could swear he saw the thing breathing. "All ships, this is Morrison," he broadcast on the fleet frequency. "We're going to buy time for the evacuation shuttles. Hit them hard and fast, then scatter. Don't try to be heroes." The battle began when the lead alien ship fired some kind of energy weapon that turned one of the mining ships into vapor. Morrison watched good people die in an instant, and his anger burned even hotter. "Return fire," he shouted. The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Missiles, energy weapons, and kinetic rounds slammed into the alien vessel. To Morrison's surprise, their weapons actually seemed to hurt it. Dark fluid leaked from several wounds in its hull, and the creature ship let out a sound like a dying animal. But more alien ships were coming, and they were learning from the first exchange. The second ship that entered the battle moved differently, dodging human weapons and returning fire with deadly accuracy. The fighting continued for hours. Human ships darted between the massive alien vessels like insects attacking giants. Some were destroyed instantly when the alien weapons hit them. Others managed to get close enough to do real damage before being blown apart. Morrison watched his small fleet being systematically destroyed, but he also watched something else. The evacuation shuttles were getting through. Thousands of colonists were being loaded onto transport ships and sent to safety while the aliens were focused on the battle. When only 7 human ships remained, Morrison made a decision that surprised even himself. His ship was surrounded by two of the alien vessels, both closing in for the kill. His crew was wounded, his weapons were nearly out of ammunition, and his engines were failing. But the last evacuation shuttle had just cleared the planet's atmosphere. "All hands! This is the captain," Morrison announced over the ship's internal communications. "Abandon ship! Get to the escape pods now!" "Sir?" Park looked at him with confusion. "What are you doing?" Morrison was already working at his command console, overriding the safety systems that normally prevented what he was about to do. "I'm going to show these aliens that humans don't go quietly." As his crew evacuated in the escape pods, Morrison manually overrode the reactor containment system. The Defiant's nuclear reactor began building toward a critical overload that would turn his ship into a massive bomb. He aimed the Defiant directly at the nearest alien vessel and pushed the engines to maximum power. The alien ship tried to move, away, but it was too slow. Morrison's ship struck it amidships just as the reactor exploded. The explosion lit up space like a new star. When the light faded, Morrison's ship was gone, and so was one of the alien vessels. The second alien ship was heavily damaged and drifting. From his escape pod, Morrison watched the remaining alien ships retreat. They had won the battle, but they had lost ships and crew in the process. More importantly, they had learned something they didn't expect. Humans fought back.